Pessachim Masechet Amoud Bet at the bottom of the page. Or the Amoud today is Masechet. Just to recap everybody what we're talking about. On Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, there was a mitzvah of Korban Pesach. The mitzvah of Korban Pesach is to bring a sheep to the Beit HaMikdash to slaughter it. Even if it happens on Shabbat, we still have the mitzvah. Even though you cannot slaughter anything on Shabbat, you cannot kill anything on Shabbat, you cannot do any manacha, any labor on Shabbat, the exception to the rule is the Korban Pesach, because the Pasuk says, Be'mo'ado. You do it in its appointed time, no matter when the appointed time is. So the Mishnah says you're allowed to shecht it. The Mishnah says you're allowed to take the blood and sprinkle it on the Mizbeach, because without that it is not a kosher korban. And the question is, are you allowed to do anything that is Isur D'Rabbanan beforehand? In other words, let's say it's out of the city limits. Or let's say like this, when you carry a baby, when you carry a 2-year-old baby, 3-year-old baby, did you really carry on Shabbat? Actually no, because there's halakha which says, Chai noseh et atzmo. A live person carries himself. So it's not really, it's lighter. Did you know that a person that is alive is lighter than a person that is deceased? What's the difference? Because the energy of the person actually picks himself up. So therefore, when you're carrying the animal on your shoulder, you're doing an Isur D'Rabbanan. Are you allowed to do that? Are you not allowed to do that? There's a 3-way machloket. It's actually a 2-way machloket. It is Rabbi Eliezer says you are allowed to do that. Rabbi Eliezer Berokinus. Rabbi Yeshua, the contemporary of Rabbi Eliezer, says you cannot do it. And Rabbi Akiva, the Talmud, says you cannot do it. One more thing to tell you before we advance is that after you kill the animal, shech the animal, you're allowed to sprinkle the blood, and you're also allowed to pierce the stomach to get the excrement inside the stomach as well. So even though you already did your mitzvah, you're still allowed to continue and go ahead and do something afterwards. The question is, can you do something d'Rabbanan before? We spoke about a Torah prohibition of slaughtering. We spoke about a Torah prohibition of piercing the stomach. It's a Torah prohibition. Can you do beforehand carrying it? Machloket. Rabbi Eliezer says yes, you can. Where does Rabbi Eliezer learn from? I need to repeat you the Mishnah because we're going to be dealing with the Mishnah, even though the Mishnah is a few pages away. Rabbi Eliezer says yes, you can, and where does he prove it from? He proves it from the fact that you can shecht it. If you can shecht, and that's a Torah prohibition, for sure you can bring the animal, which is a rabbinical prohibition. If you can transgress the higher prohibition, for sure you can transgress the lower prohibition. That is Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hokinus. Rabbi Yeshua said no to him. He said, no, I'll prove it to you from Yom Tov. Yom Tov, Yom Tov you're allowed to shecht. You're allowed to cook, but you can't carry an animal. So you can do a mitzvah, you can do a doraita to eat, and you can't do a rabbanan. The machloket over there was Rabbi Eliezer says it's a mitzvah to eat on Yom Tov, and Rabbi Eliezer says you don't have a mitzvah to eat on Yom Tov. That's what we said yesterday. So again, Rabbi Eliezer says don't prove it to me from Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is not a mitzvah. Again, on Yom Tov you can shecht, you can cook. Can you carry an animal on your shoulder? Can you do a d'Rabbanan to bring it? I'm really hungry. I have my barbecue over here, but the animal's over there. He doesn't want to cross the street. Can I carry him across the street? You can't. So you see, you can't do a d'Rabbanan even though you can do a doraita. Says Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer, you see, you can't carry the Korban Pesach even though you're going to allow to shecht the Korban Pesach. Rabbi Eliezer said that's different. Korban Pesach is a mitzvah. Eating on Yom Tov is not a mitzvah. That's what we said yesterday. Rabbi Eliezer's shita is you're allowed to fast on Yom Tov if you want. You could eat, but if you want, you can fast. So that's what we're holding at the bottom of the page. Last 3 lines. Amar Rav Ashi. The fact that according to Rabbi Eliezer, Yom Tov is permissible to eat. Eat the pirka. Now we can ask a question on Rabbi Eliezer. Yom Tov shitir bo melacha shel reshut. Turns out, according to you, Rabbi Eliezer, when you're slaughtering and cooking on Yom Tov, it's a reshut. You don't need to do that. You could fast. It is permissible. So you're allowed to do something. We're very lenient on you. We're so lenient that we're allowing you to do something that's not necessarily a mitzvah. Lo itir shvut ima. And even though we're lenient, we don't allow you to carry the animal. We don't allow you to do a d'Rabbanan. So as lenient as we are, we're not allowing you to carry it to do the d'Rabbanan. Shabbat shelo itir ba'era menacha shel mitzvah eno din shelo tatir shvut. Well, Shabbat we're more machmir because we don't let you do a permissible act, a reshut act. We let you only do a mitzvah act. Korban Pesach is a mitzvah when you're shechting on Shabbat. Yom Tov, when you're shechting your meal, is if you want to, yes. If you don't want to, no. And here that we're more lenient, we don't let you do Rabbanan, for sure. Here where we're more machmir, that we only let you do the mitzvah of shechting it with the doraita, we won't let you do the Rabbanan. Shema, and Rabbi Eliezer says the opposite. Shut the mitzvah adifre. And Rabbi Eliezer answers, no, don't prove from there, because there's a difference. When do we put Isur the Rabbanan? When do we put it? Because when it's more close to being mundane. But in a mitzvah, we don't need to do any Isur the Rabbanan. I'll explain myself. When do we tell you not to do something? Don't carry an animal from across the street. Because if we let you carry the animal that's alive, you might carry a dead animal, a shechted animal, and that's Isur Doraita. So we put Isur the Rabbanan. When will we put Isur de Rabbanan? When it's a mundane thing. Because there, you're not in the framework of mitzvah, and you might be able to, if you do this, you'll do this. But when you're doing a mitzvah of Doraita, and you're involved in shechting the Korban Pesach for a mitzvah Doraita, I can waive the Rabbanan over there, because you're closer to the holiness, and you're closer to realizing that you can't do an Isur, so therefore Rabbi Eliezer says you can't learn from here. Okay, now we're just going to go back to what's said. I want to repeat you one more thing we said in the Mishnah. That was Rabbi Yeshua. How did Rabbi Akiva, who is the student of Rabbi Eliezer, how did he try to disprove Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer, again, we're talking about carrying the animal, which is the Rabbanan on Shabbat, which happens to be Erev Yom Tov. What did Rabbi Eliezer say? He learned from Haza'ah. Haza'ah is to sprinkle water. Sprinkling water on who? A person that is Tameh. There's a person that is Tameh met. He has touched the dead corpse. His purification, it takes him 7 days to become tahor. It's on day 3 and day 7. We need to sprinkle him the water on day 3. We need to sprinkle him the water on day 7. If you don't sprinkle the water, he is tameh. Now what happens if his day 7 is Shabbat Erev Pesach? And if he's impure, he can't bring the Korban Pesach. And we can't bring the Korban Pesach. He can't eat the Korban Pesach. And if he can't eat the Korban Pesach, it's a karet. And what is the problem of sprinkling water on Shabbat? No problem from the Torah, rabbinical problem. It's called metaken mana, it's metaken gavra, the same way that you cannot build a chair, you cannot build a table. Let's say this table, can you put it together on Shabbat? You're not allowed to. Now let's say the table's tameh. You are allowed to eat on it in the time of the Beit Mikdash, you're not allowed. Well, what if I put in the mikveh? Then you're allowed. So since putting in the mikveh allows me to use it, it looks like I made the table. That's called mitaken mana. So therefore, sprinkling water on the person looks like I made the person. And therefore, it's Isur de Rabbanan. So let me do that. And Rabbi Akiva says, look, Rabbi Eliezer, you can't sprinkle water on a person, and it's a de Rabbanan, so you can't carry the animal, which is a de Rabbanan. And Rabbi Eliezer told him, no, you can carry. If you remember what it said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer told him, no, I'm going to prove to you, since you can shech the animal, so you can sprinkle the water. Rabbi Akiva went back to him and told him something funny. He said, maybe I'll do the opposite. Since you can't sprinkle the water, maybe you can bring Korban Pesach. If you can't sprinkle the water, the Rabbanan, then you can't bring the animal, which is a Doraita. If already the Rabbanan you can't do Doraita. And Rabbi Eliezer got mad at him. What are you talking about? It's written in the Torah that you could do that. And therefore, that was the discussion. We're going to discuss that today. I want to repeat it one more time so you have it clear, because the whole page is talking about it. Rabbi Eliezer says, you can shecht, Doraita, and can carry the animal, the Rabbanan. Rabbi Akiva says, you can shecht, you can't carry the animal. Says Rabbi Akiva, you know why I know you can't carry the animal? Because you can't sprinkle the water on the guy that's tamei met, and that's the Rabbanan. Rabbi Eliezer says, yes, you can sprinkle the water. You know why? Because if you can shecht, Doraita, for sure you can sprinkle the water, the Rabbanan. If you can shecht, Doraita, for sure you can carry the animal, the Rabbanan. And on this, Rabbi Akiva says, no, I'll tell you the opposite, which is for sure not true. Rabbi Akiva is saying something that cannot even begin to say. If you can't, maybe you can't sprinkle the water, so you can't bring the animal. If you can't do the Rabbanan, so for sure you can't bring the animal. So that's what we're going to discuss now. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Eliezer.
And he's saying it's not possible because you could bring the animal.
Yes, and Rabbi says, what are you talking about? You're telling me things that are written in the Torah. It's not possible. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Umani im dachu. Okay, now here's another discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Mali im dachu machshire mitzvah shel achar shrita. We know that you're allowed to burn the fats, according to Tosfot, you're allowed to burn the fats after the animal. After you shech the animal, you're allowed to do extra things. You're allowed to take the fats and you're allowed to burn them on the mizbeach. After you shech the animal, you're allowed to continue the process, even though you did your mitzvah. You shechted your animal, you got the meat, you're allowed to take the fats and you're allowed to burn them on the mizbeach on Shabbat, even though it's not necessary. So it's called machshire mitzvah. It's something that accompanies the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. You're allowed to do after the fact you did the mitzvah. It's a Shabbat. Madi, I'm reading it again. Umadi im dachu mafshirim mitzvah shirachal shchita et Shabbat. The parts of the mitzvah that come together with the mitzvah, you're allowed to do them after you shechted it on Shabbos. Dit avid le mitzvah, that we already did the mitzvah. Lo yidachu mafshirim mitzvah shlifnei shchita et Shabbat. 1 second. If you can do things that accompany the mitzvah after, so for sure you can do things before. That means you can carry it. If you, the real thing is shechting and cooking. If after that you're still allowed to burn the fats, which is doraita, so if you can do something after you already did the mitzvah, so for sure before I did the mitzvah. If already I did the mitzvah, you let me continue being michalel, so for sure let me be michalel Shabbat to be able to do the mitzvah, even with the Rabbanan. Amaru Rabbi Akiva, no, it doesn't make sense. Demadim dachum mashrim mitzvah shirachal shrita et Shabbat sharei dachta shrita et Shabbat. That's not true. Once we did the mitzvah and we got to finish the job. Once you shechted it, and there's still a few parts left. So once we already mechalen, we mechalen everything. Tomar yitchu mashrim mitzvah mishlifnei shrita et Shabbat shelo tidchet shrita ידחו מאשרי מצווה שלפני שחיטה את השבת, שלא תדחה שחיטה את השבת. It doesn't make sense that we need to be, we will not do anything before if we have not yet shechted it. And I'll explain. Once you did the mitzvah, what is Rabbi Eliezer saying? Listen, there's the main mitzvah, A. Well, let's say B is the main mitzvah. Well, once you did B, we'll let you do C. For sure you can do A. If already you shechted it and you continue to burn it, which is not really necessary, for sure you're going to let me do A to let me get to B. And on this, Rabbi Akiva says, not at all true. I have a different way of looking at it. Once you shechted it and you burnt it, well, we let you continue the job. But who said I'm going to let you carry it in order to shecht it? Maybe no, don't carry it and don't shecht it. Once the job is started, finish the job. But who said I'm going to let you start? The guy comes into the store. The store's about to close. Once he's in the store, continue shopping. I gotta go. The guy goes to go home. He's gonna stay over half an hour. But who said I'm gonna open the store once the store's already closed? We don't let you do that. Another way of looking at it is Dvar Acher. Shema yimtza zevach pasul. You're telling me v'nimtza mecharedet Shabbat demafreya. When you're gonna carry it, you don't know if it's not a taref. So when you're going to shecht it, so you're carrying it on Shabbat. When you're going to shecht it, what are you going to do? You're going to check the lungs, so you see the hole in the lungs. So it turns out that you just carry the animal for an animal that was not even allowed to be a korban pesach. So you just did a miracha for something which is not needed. So the Gemara says, Yachi mishachet nami lo tishchat. Well, if that's true, don't shecht any animal. Why? Shema yimtza zevach pasul nimsa mechel Shabbat. What that should mean, if you're going with this logic, you should never shecht any korban pesach, because any korban pesach you might shecht and you might find the lungs are not kosher. Nemafreya ela hade amar bereisha ela amar le bereisha upache ve'adar amani hach demani im dachu. So really, the conversation we had over here was switched. First thing that Rabbi Akiva told him, first thing that Rabbi Akiva told him, no, you can't carry it because you might find it that's going to be a taref when you're shechting it. And therefore you were mechanel Shabbat. And this Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, if that's true, so what's the difference between carrying it and shechting it? Any animal that you're going to shecht, so you could find that there's a hole inside the lungs and it's not kosher at all. So therefore you shouldn't be allowed to shecht any animals. Rather what? We go on chazakah. Most animals are kosher, so you're allowed to shecht it, you're allowed to carry it. Then Rabbi Akiva told him, no. Then Rabbi Eliezer told them, no, I'm going to tell you why you're allowed to do it. Why you're allowed to do it? Because if you're allowed to do after, you're allowed to do before. And this Rabbi Akiva said this far is not good. After is because you're already in the door, and before the door is already locked. Okay, so basically we had two reasons why Rabbi Eliezer was trying to prove his point, and it didn't work against Rabbi Akiva. Now we're going to see something crazy and something interesting. Is that what happened was, like I told you, Rabbi Eliezer wants to prove that carrying the animal is okay. Rabbi Akiva tells him it's not okay. Rabbi Akiva tells him, because you're not allowed to sprinkle water, so it's a darabanan, so you can also carry the animal. And on this, Rabbi Eliezer told him, no, you can't sprinkle the animal. On this, how do you know you can sprinkle the animal? If you can shech the animal, which is a doraita, for sure you can sprinkle the water, which is the rabbanan. On this, Rabbi Akiva told him the opposite. Since you can't sprinkle the water, so you can't even bring the korban. You can't bring the korban. And not bringing the korban for sure doesn't make sense, because the Torah says you're allowed to bring the korban. Look what it says here. Eshiv Rabbi Akiva v'amar, hazat uchiach. Tanya, amar lo Rabbi Eliezer, Akiva b'shchita hishivtani, you mocking me with shchita, b'shchita itiyeh mitato. And he told Rabbi Akiva, you're going to be killed with shchita. Rabbi Eliezer cursed Rabbi Akiva. You understand what's happening?
Wow.
Rabbi Eliezer saying, Rabbi Akiva is saying a law that doesn't make sense. Oh, you can't bring the water, you can't bring the korban. Don't check the korban. What do you mean? It's written in the Torah, you check the korban. You're trying to tell me now things that are not, you're trying to uproot the mitzvah of the Torah, you're making a fool of me? And by the way, the Yerushalmi says that Rabbi Akiva, don't forget, Rabbi Eliezer was Gadol Adon. Rabbi Akiva was a Talmid that learned 40 years Torah by his Rebbeim. He learned 40 years by Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua, and for 40 years he was the Magid. He lived 100. Yes, he was 120 years. 40 years he was Amaretz. 40 to 80 he learned Torah. 80 to 120 he was the leader of Am Yisrael. To the point where Moshe Rabbeinu asked why shouldn't he get the Torah. This was the first time that Rabbi Akiva spoke up in Shir after 13 years. The Yerushalmi says the first time, and the first time that Rabbi Eliezer doesn't know who he is. Never spoke to him. He sees he's a good Talmud, but doesn't know who he is. Rabbi Eliezer tells him, "You're mocking me with shchita. You're going to get shechted." And in fact, Rabbi Akiva did get killed. He got killed by the Romans because of the curse of Rabbi Eliezer. So why did Rabbi Eliezer need to do that? Because, and by the way, we're going to see why Rabbi Akiva did that. Why did Rabbi Akiva sort of mock Rabbi Eliezer? So let's see what happened, and I'll tell you the answer. Amar lo Rebbe, and here's what happened. Amar lo Rebbe, ad takpireni, do not deny b'shat tzadin. When we're talking about halacha, kach mikumrani mimcha hazah shvuti. Rabbi Akiva told him, why are you telling me that? You taught us that we can't sprinkle the water. I'm not saying it for myself. I'm taking it from you. So he says, ve'ena doche, ve'ena doche te Shabbat. So why, if Rabbi Eliezer taught that originally, he changed his mind? The Gemara says, Amarula, first answer, which we're not going to accept. Amaruna Rabbi Eliezer ki agmere hazara de truma. When he spoke about not sprinkling water on a Talmud person, it was to eat teruma. You know that to eat truma is a mitzvah of the Torah. A Kohen is allowed to eat. He actually says a bracha. Eating truma is a mitzvah. So what if a guy's tameh? He can't eat truma. Well, what if we sprinkle water on him? When we sprinkle water on him, we can't sprinkle the water on him on Shabbat. So Rabbi Eliezer said you can't sprinkle the water to purify a tamid Kohen on Shabbos to eat the truma, which is a mitzvah. Agmare. You know why? Because truma you don't separate on Shabbos for the same reason. If I have food and it's tevel, I didn't yet separate it to the Kohen and to the Levi. I can't eat it. So maybe let me separate the truma and then eat. You can't separate on Shabbos for the same reason we spoke before. You can't separate on Shabbos because it looks like you're fixing something, and therefore you're going to go fix your table. So this says Rabbi Akiva Nami, and when so why did Rabbi Eliezer change his mind? Because really. Rabbi Akiva, so therefore, since you can't separate truma, you can't purify a guy to eat truma. The Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva nami ki udve azad de truma udve. And really, Rabbi Akiva, when he was telling Rabbi Eliezer, he was telling him truma. He was telling azab truma. I'm going to prove to you from sprinkling of truma. And Rabbi Eliezer himself said that. But what Rabbi Eliezer understood that he was telling him, why was he mad at him? Udve shi mitzvah de truma. Ki udve hazad de truma udve shehi mitzvah b'mishum shvut. So eating truma is a mitzvah, and purifying the person is only a derabanan. V'hu savar hazad de Pesach kamutavna. And Rabbi Eliezer thought that he was telling him about Pesach. So really, according to this point, which we're going to change in just 1 second, Rabbi Eliezer is saying you can carry the animal. Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi, azah, you're not allowed to azah, so you can't carry the animal. Derabanan, derabanan. Rabbi Eliezer says, you're allowed to do azah. Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi, you're not allowed to do azah. And Rabbi Eliezer, and then he told him a whole flip over there. I'm going to prove you kavachom. And Rabbi Eliezer got mad at him and he cursed him. Why are you cursing me? You told us. No, I told you truma. I also was telling you truma. And Rabbi Eliezer understood that it was to matmet for the Korban Pesach. But the Gemara changes this. Look what it says. The Gemara says, Mativ Rabba. Rabba says not true. Eshiv Rabbi Akiva, because another bite explains the discussion. Here it's clear. In our Mishnah it just said haza'ah, but here in the Brayta it says haza'at met. We're sprinkling on the guy that is tameh for to matmet. Shechal shvi shelo yom Shabbat ube'erev Pesach shu mitzvah, and we're speaking clearly about erev Pesach. Mishum shvut ve'ena dochet Shabbat. You're not to sprinkle on the guy on erev Pesach, which is Shabbos, clearly. And avadai hazad the Pesach agmere. Actually, what it was, the Gemara changes. Not like Ula, Rabbi Eliezer taught him that he's not allowed to do it even for Pesach. So why is Rabbi Eliezer fighting back to Rabbi Akiva? He's telling him what he taught him. Rabbi Eliezer, gamre itakar. Rabbi Eliezer became sick and he forgot his learning. Forgot it. I'm not sure if he became sick mentally, or if he became sick and he wasn't able to constantly review. To remember things, they used to say on the Or Sameach, or Big Talmid Chacham, used to say on the Rogachover that he has a great memory. And he answered, I don't have a great memory. I finish the Torah every day. Like I chazer everything every month, like we saw in Rav Sheshet. If you chazer everything constantly, you never forget it. So was he sick and he couldn't chazer? Or was he sick and he mentally lost it? I'm not sure, but he forgot it. Rabbi Eliezer became sick and he forgot it. And Ve'ata Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva wanted to remind him. He's fighting with Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, Hazah will prove it. And what does it mean? Hazah, you taught us Hazah. So why did he? And then Rabbi Eliezer says, no, Hazah is mutar. So then Rabbi Akiva, what he does, he says, no, Hazah is mutar because Shchita is mutar. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, maybe Shchita is asur because Hazah is asur. And that's a foolish thing. And really what he wanted, and Rashi explains, that Rabbi Eliezer should think that out and say, one second, it's actually true. That's a real pshat. If Haza'ah is asur, then the korban should be asur. Then the korban should be, if the Haza'ah is asur, the korban should be asur. And he's going to think it out. He's going to remember himself that he actually taught that. But Rabbi Eliezer didn't catch the hint. So Rabbi Akiva was just trying to spark Rabbi Eliezer that they should remember what he told him. So the Gemara asks a question, my tama, if that's true, v'neiman behedget, just tell him straight. Why do you have to tell him this whole roundabout Kal which is foolish and mocking your Rebbe? Savar lav orech ara. It's not derech eretz for me to tell his Rebbe that he forgot. So Rabbi Akiva thought he was doing a mitzvah and trying to tell him in a funny way, which would make it that Rabbi Eliezer is going to remember, he's going to retract his halakha. But actually, Rabbi Eliezer got mad and he cursed him, and Rabbi Akiva ended up dying from that. From here we see how important it is kavod of chachamim. Even though Rabbi Akiva for sure had intent, he was doing L'Shem Shamayim, and how dangerous it is, a curse of a Rav, even if it was not justified. Can I have the blue Dirshu? I want to show you what it says over here. They write in the Pessachim on this. Masechet. Anybody who has koach for this book, it's amazing. What they put on the side. Look what it says here. It says over here that the Chazon Ish says that kilato aita chova. Rabbi Eliezer had to curse him. Liot kavod Torah kivua bilravot. Because now we're talking about the Mesorah of Torah. We're talking on the highest level. We're talking at the head of Am Yisrael and the next head of Am Yisrael. Shelo yidraglu bizizul kavod chachamim. You had a good intention, but it's not right to do that. So that people should never let down their guard on the honor of the ones that are teaching the Torah. Because it's otherwise, if you don't give the proper honor, you don't appreciate the message. So that's Api Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish says he had to curse him. It was a mitzvah for him to do that in order to protect that the future generations shouldn't get used to mocking Torah. When mockery starts, there's no limit to the mockery. And when a person can make a joke and another joke and another joke, you never know which ends it could get to. And if you're mocking the rabbis, then there's no more kavod of the rabbis like today we see. Even in us, the Moroccans and everything, there was always a respect to the Chachamim. There was no such thing. The Chacham, even the guy's his own level, he's not so strong, he's not so religious, but the rabbis, they don't make fun. Today, with all the media and everything what's going on in Israel, they're mocking the rabbis that people can't come close anymore. If somebody wants to do tshuva, he can't do tshuva anymore. Because that's the guy who wants to do tshuva, but they already told him his whole life, the rabbis, it's a joke, so he can't do tshuva. There's really Gedul Ador, and they're mocking Gedul Ador. So it's a big klala. So Rabbi Eliezer had to make sure that they shouldn't get out of hand. ואף שרבי עקיבא נזהר בכבוד רבי אליעזר רבו, לא אמר לו בפירוש שכח, אלא בא להם בעקיפין שיזכיר. He knew Rabbi Akiva was trying to do it in the most subtle way to remind his Rebbe. He didn't tell him, Rebbe, you forgot. That's wrong. He didn't do that. That would have been worse. He's trying to do it in a subtle way. אך כיוון שלמעשה נפגע כבוד רבי אליעזר. At the end of the day, Rabbi Eliezer was offended. פגיעה, look what it says, גורמת ביטול כוח השפעת הרב ישראל. When the Rav is offended, he can't be mashpia. The kavod that we give to the tzaddik, it allows him the ability to give over his message. When the tzaddik felt slighted, Rabbi Eliezer felt slighted, he wasn't able to give anymore. So it actually weakened now the transmission of the Torah. כשישראל אינם נזרים בכבוד חכמים, מסכיניהם, הרי זה כאילו אין כוח כרמים כלל, ולכן נענש. And even though, it says over here, Mitam ze Rabbi Eliezer shekir ma'at Rabbi Akiva. Here it's nothing I'm saying. He knew Rabbi Eliezer's greatness. He knew he was doing it. Danu lekaf schut. לא מחל לו, כדי להצילו מן העונש החמור. Here, by Rabbi Eliezer, they're saying, here he says, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, by Rabbi Eliezer being makpid, actually saved Rabbi Akiva from bigger punishments. Yes, he got punished in this world, but in the next world he didn't get punished. So actually he was doing a service, and sometimes you see tzaddikim like that. The Baba Sadli, even Rabbeinu and Rav Nassan once, was very stark, was very hard, very sharp with the Talmud in order to save him from bigger punishments that could happen if they weren't Nizar. That's what it says here. שאין לרב למחול לביגת כעובדו משום שכל קיום כלל ישראל מוטל בסכנה על ידי פגיעת כבוד הרב. All of כלל ישראל, when there was Zizur of Chachamim, all of Am Yisrael is in danger, like we see today. So that's why it's a big musar, this Gemara. The Gemara continues. והזעה, מה איתם לא דחי השבת? מכדי טיטול בעלמא. So now let's understand, what's the big deal of carrying the water? What's the big deal of sprinkling the water? It's really a derabanan. Now we understand that you're not allowed to. But why aren't you allowed to? What's the big deal? If you're allowed to shecht, you're allowed to do all these things doraita, why not just sprinkle the water to get the guy ready for Korban Pesach? The Gemara answer is Mishu. It's just, maybe it's mukse, it's nothing, it's easy. Titre Shabbat, Mishum Pesach. Amar Rabba, Gzera Shema Yitelnena V'yamenu Arba Amod B'Shut Rabim. It's a Gzera you might carry. Since the water might not be in the Beit Mikdash, it might be outside, you might carry it for Amot. It's not just a mukse prohibition, which is not leading. There's two types of Rabbanan. One Rabbanan is we want to remind you of the holiness of Shabbos, keep your mind on Shabbos, mukse. Don't touch a phone because I want you to remember Shabbos. But so, what's the problem with the water? Mukse? No big deal. What's the issue over here? So the Gemara says, no, you might carry it. Whenever to prevent you from a bigger Avirah of carrying, so then we're going to put it. By the way, where do we see that? If you don't have the shofar, why don't we blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Because you might carry the shofar. Mitzvah doraita, we don't do it. Because of this issur of maybe carrying on Shabbos. Okay, now, just one more thing to tell you. It's pretty quick now. To tell you another shita, which you might not be aware of. Rabbi Eliezer shita, in Masechet Shabbat, when it comes to doing a brit milah on a baby. What is the halakha? Are you allowed to do brit milah on baby on Yom Tov? Yes. What about machshirei mitzvah? Are you allowed to do isur doraita? No. Machshirei mitzvah means doing things which are isur doraita to create a tool to do something to do brit milah. For example, if you don't have a knife, what do? Too bad. If the knife is here ready, all you have to do is do the brit, do it. But if I have to make the knife, you're not allowed to. Rabbi Eliezer says you're allowed to cut wood, you're allowed to make a fire. You're allowed to get metal, you're allowed to form the knife. You're allowed to do anything, even doraita, to get to the brit milah. So why would Rabbi Eliezer...
What about carry it?
Even carry it.
Okay.
You're allowed to carry it.
A lot more simple than...
according to Rabbi Eliezer, you're allowed to do everything to do the brit milah.
To make a knife on Shabbat.
You're allowed to, for Rabbi Eliezer.
But how can you go against the doraita? I don't understand.
Because how can you do a brit? So when the Torah says you're allowed to, that's the question. Torah says do the brit milah, b'yom hashmini, no matter which day. Yeah. So cutting is isur doraita, right? Making the child bleed is isur doraita. So how are you allowed to do it? Torah said. How are you allowed to shech the korban pesach? Torah said. Torah says don't keep Shabbos. Torah says do bris milah on Shabbos. So what does it mean do bris milah? Most Tanaim learn just the brit. Everything else that you could do before, we don't let you. Brit, you can't do it before. This you could do before. Anything you could do before, we don't let you do. And Rabbi Eliezer pushes it so far. This is called brit. Making a knife is called doing the brit, because I can't do the brit without a knife.
But you can do it before.
You're right, but the Rabbi Eliezer says even if you did it before, the Torah lets you. And Rabbi Yeshua understands, no, whatever you couldn't do before, you got to do before. Whatever you couldn't do before, you can do today. Not, you're allowed to do it, you have to do it before Shabbos. So the question is now, why did Rabbi Eliezer, who holds in general that you're allowed to do even isur doraita, to do a mitzvah doraita, why does he not let you carry the water? He's the one that taught it, just he forgot it. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer, Navrei, that Rabbi Eliezer mashir mitzvah duchin Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer holds that you're allowed to do even machshireh, even to do the machshir, the tools to do the mitzvah is pushing out Shabbos. Answer is a beautiful answer. Amre nehia, amre hanimile echad digavra gufe chaze. When the person is ready, verami chiyuva aleh, and there's obligation on him. And I'll explain. The baby is ready for the bris. The baby is there, and we have an obligation now. So carry the knife. Here, the guy is tameh. He doesn't have any yet obligation to do the Korban Pesach. The only way he's going to have an obligation is if we bring the water. Then we know you bring the water. We let you bring the water, we let you bring the knife when the baby has an obligation. But if bringing the water will give the person an obligation, then we don't let you. That's what it says here. Chazeh. Therefore, he has no obligation. Therefore, we're not allowed to bring the water. There's no obligation right now. Bring the water will create the obligation. We don't let you. Look at this beautiful pshat, and that's next. Amar Rabba, Nidivrei Rabbi Eliezer. According to this, Katan Bari Mehamin Nochamin Navroto. Now we have a mitzvah Masechet Shabbat that you have to have water heated up for the baby to wash him in after the bris. It was one of the things of the bris. It was ordered to give a strength to the baby. They would bathe him in hot water after the brit milah. Today I don't think we do that. We don't bathe him, but that's what they used to do, and it was a way of giving strength to the baby. So according to this, it sounds like heating up the water for Rabbi Eliezer is only allowed for a healthy baby, because that healthy baby has the mitzvah of doing a bris. Because he's now fit for the mitzvah. He has an obligation, so he can even heat up water. Katan choleh, but according to Rabbah, if it's a sick child, he's sick, and the way you're getting ready for the bris is by heating him up. But he doesn't have to do the bris, so you can't heat it up. That is the opinion of Rabbah. Amar Rabbah, in 1 second, that doesn't make sense. Heating up water for a healthy baby doesn't need water. He's a healthy baby. Actually, the fact that we do heat up for a healthy baby is because everybody's considered sick for a bris. Meaning, at the moment of the bris, he's healthy, but he will be weakened because of the bris. And because of that, we'll need to have water ready for him. So we can't heat up the water because everybody needs the water. Therefore, nobody's really in the state of making the bris. So the only way you can heat up the water is by doing it before Shabbos. You got to heat the water before Shabbos, keep it at a hot temperature, and then do the bris, whether if it's a healthy baby or whether it's a sick baby. So you're never allowed to heat up hot water for a baby because no baby is fit for the bris. There's a little pshat over here that I saw in the Dirshu. It says, what's the maklok between Rabbah and Rabbah? If a child is healthy but will become sick because of the bris, so that's called a healthy baby, and you're allowed to go ahead and do the bris, and you're allowed to heat up water before him because he is going to need the water after. But according to a sick baby who can't do the bris anyways, you're not allowed to heat up water for him, even if the water might help him get through the situation. But according to Rabbah, every baby is called sick because we don't care if he's healthy to get to the bris. Since he's going to need it 1 second later, it's considered as sick, and therefore they're not really fit for the bris unless you heat the water. Therefore, you can never heat up the water on Shabbos. So bottom line, according to Rabbi Eliezer, any baby for Rabbah, you can never heat up water on Shabbos, even though he lets you do Isurei Doraita for the mitzvah. The baby's not really obligated to do the mitzvah because he's not really so-called healthy unless you heat up the water. So therefore, at bottom line, you got to heat up the water before Shabbat. They will continue.